From mysterious illnesses to shocking assassinations, from last-minute regrets to words that echo through history, this is the untold story of how every U.S. president met their end. Some left behind powerful final messages. Others spoke of mundane things like soup. But it all begins with George Washington, whose death holds a secret of its own. Ready to discover the strange, unexpected, and sometimes eerie deaths of America's leaders? Let's dive in. We begin with George Washington, the first president of the United States. His story ended in a tragic yet unforgettable moment. After a long day riding his horse in cold, snowy weather, Washington contracted a severe throat infection, likely epiglottitis. Today, this would be easily treated with antibiotics. But back then, doctors resorted to bloodletting, which was thought to help but only worsened his condition. He lost 80 ounces of blood, nearly the equivalent of 6 Red Bulls. As death approached, Washington calmly told his doctor, "I die hard, but I am not afraid to go." And in his final moments, his last words were simply, "'Tis well." A quiet yet profound end to a life filled with struggle. Now, let's dive into one of the most eerie coincidences in U.S. history. The deaths of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, two of America's founding fathers, on the very same day, the 4th of July, 1826. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was a moment that will forever remain a part of the nation's legacy. Adams and Jefferson had started as revolutionary friends, both key figures in the Declaration of Independence. However, after the 1800 election, they became bitter political rivals. For over a decade, they didn't speak, only to reconnect later as pen pals, rekindling their friendship. Then, on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson, weakened by pneumonia and kidney infections, asked, "Is it the 4th?" When told it wasn't yet, he managed to hold on for another day. His final words were, "No doctor, nothing more." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, John Adams, a frail 90-year-old, was struggling with heart failure. Unaware that his old friend had passed, Adams uttered his famous last words, "Thomas Jefferson survives." A truly remarkable coincidence, where two friends turned rivals passed on the same day, on the day that marked America's independence. Now, we turn to the 4th President of the United States, James Madison, the father of the U.S. Constitution. Madison's deathbed was surrounded by his family and doctors, who tried desperately to keep him alive until the 4th of July, 1836. They believed that the significance of passing away on Independence Day, just as his two friends Adams and Jefferson had, would be fitting. When offered more stimulants by his niece, Madison replied, "Nothing more than a change of mind, my dear. I always talk better lying down." This was a calm and peaceful acceptance of his impending death. And sadly, he passed away just days before the 4th of July, missing the anniversary by only a few days. Monroe, the 5th president, experienced his own heart-wrenching final moments. Suffering from tuberculosis and heart trouble, he died on the 4th of July, 1831. His last words were filled with a profound sense of loss as he mourned the passing of his dear friend, James Madison. Monroe said, "I regret that I should leave this world without again beholding him." A final, sorrowful nod to a friendship that had spanned many years. He became the 3rd U.S. president to pass on the 4th of July, further cementing the day's significance in American presidential history. John Quincy Adams, the 6th president, didn't retire to live out his years in peace after his presidency. Instead, he returned to Congress, where he continued to serve as a representative. In 1848, while casting a no vote in the House of Representatives, he suddenly suffered a massive stroke, collapsing onto the floor. Despite being carried out, Adams reportedly said, "This is the last of earth. I am content." A powerful statement, marking the end of his long public service career, while also hinting at the peace he had finally found with his own life. Andrew Jackson, one of the most infamous and resilient figures in U.S. presidential history, faced his own demise after battling tuberculosis, heart problems, and dropsy, a condition causing swelling. Despite his tough exterior and history of surviving a presidential assassination attempt, he died quietly, surrounded by family. His last words were incredibly soft and reflective. "Oh, do not cry. Be good children, and we shall all meet in heaven." Jackson, known for his fierce personality in battles, ended his life on a peaceful note, showing a softer side in his final moments. A reminder that even the toughest among us can soften in the face of death. Next, we turn to the 8th president, Martin Van Buren. Van Buren had struggled with asthma and heart problems throughout his life. His final moments were marked by an air of quiet acceptance. He passed away at his luxurious estate, Lindenwold, in 1862, surrounded by his family. His last words were simple, yet profound. "There is but one reliance," expressing his trust in God, perhaps reflecting on the peace he found in his faith after a long and turbulent political career. Though Van Buren lived a long life, his passing was marked by quiet reflection, a far cry from the dramatic, high-stakes nature of his time in office. William Henry Harrison's presidency is marked by one of the shortest terms in American history, lasting only 31 days. His downfall began with a tragic mistake during his inauguration, where he gave a 2-hour speech in the freezing rain without wearing a coat. Initially believed to have caught pneumonia, recent studies suggest that Harrison likely died from either typhoid fever or septic shock due to contaminated water at the White House. Harrison's final words, however, were filled with a resigned sense of duty. "I am about to die. I expect the summons soon. I have tried to discharge my duties faithfully. I regret nothing." His presidency was short, but it remains one of the most tragic and unlucky in American history. Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States, met his end in a rather bizarre way. During a 4th of July celebration in Washington, D.C., Taylor ate a bowl of raw cherries and drank several glasses of milk to cool off from the summer heat. Unfortunately, food safety was not a priority at the time, and Taylor contracted gastroenteritis, leading to his death 3 days later. However, many people believed he was poisoned due to the tense political atmosphere at the time. But forensic tests, conducted much later, found no evidence of foul play. In the end, it was likely just bad cherries. In his final moments, Taylor uttered, "I am about to die. I expect the summons soon. I have tried to discharge my duties faithfully. I regret nothing." A bittersweet ending to his presidency, and one that remains shrouded in mystery. Franklin Pierce, the 14th president, faced a tragic personal loss just weeks before taking office, when his only son was killed in a horrific train accident. This devastation pushed Pierce into a downward spiral of depression, ultimately leading him to alcoholism and the destruction of his liver. After losing his re-election bid, Pierce passed away alone, with no recorded last words. His death was a sad, silent end to a presidency that is often remembered for its inability to prevent the nation's slide toward civil war. The story of Pierce is one of personal loss, political failure, and a life marked by deep sorrow. James Buchanan, the 15th president, is often remembered as one of the weakest leaders in American history. As the country teetered on the edge of the Civil War, Buchanan did little to prevent the impending conflict. His presidency was filled with indecision and a failure to act decisively in the face of growing tensions. In his final days, Buchanan succumbed to a severe respiratory infection. While some speculated that he may have been a victim of the mysterious National Hotel disease, the true cause of his death remains uncertain. His final words were, "O Lord God Almighty, as God wills," an expression of resignation to the fate that awaited the nation. Buchanan's passing marked the end of a presidency that many historians believe did little to prepare America for the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, one of the most revered presidents in American history, met his tragic end in one of the most dramatic and violent ways possible. On the evening of the 14th of April, 1865, Lincoln was attending a play at Ford's Theater when John Wilkes Booth, an actor with Confederate sympathies, shot him in the head at point-blank range. Lincoln's final moments were not filled with profound or philosophical words, but rather a casual reassurance to his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, in the theater box. He said, "Don't think anything about it. Those words, innocuous at the time, would be the last he ever spoke before succumbing to his injuries. Lincoln's assassination was a turning point in American history, and his death marked the beginning of a long and painful reconstruction process for the country. After Abraham Lincoln's assassination, Andrew Johnson, the 17th president, ascended to office during a time of great national turmoil. His presidency was marked by conflict and controversy, as he struggled with the reconstruction of the South following the Civil War. Despite his efforts to restore peace, Johnson was deeply unpopular and narrowly avoided impeachment. His death in 1875 was marked by 2 strokes, which left him paralyzed on one side. As he struggled with his health, Johnson's final words were, "My right side is paralyzed. I need no doctor. I can overcome my own troubles." A fitting statement for a man who had spent much of his life fighting to overcome adversity. But in the end, his personal struggles would catch up with him. Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th president and the commanding general of the Union Army during the Civil War, lived a life filled with both triumphs and disappointments. After leaving office, Grant faced financial ruin due to a bad investment scheme and was diagnosed with throat cancer, likely a result of his smoking habit. Despite the pain and suffering from cancer, Grant determined to leave a legacy for his family, so he spent his final days writing his memoirs. His last words, a simple yet poignant request, were water. A reminder of the basic human need that, even in his final moments, was impossible to fulfill without help. Grant's final days were marked by an immense personal sacrifice, with his family's well-being being his last concern. Rutherford B. Hayes, the 19th president, lived a full life marked by public service and dedication. He passed away at the age of 70 from heart failure. His last words were deeply emotional, reflecting his love for his late wife, Lucy, who had passed away several years earlier. Hayes said, "I know that I'm going where Lucy is." It was a peaceful acknowledgement that he was ready to reunite with the love of his life after years of serving his country. Though his presidency is remembered for its controversies and the end of Reconstruction, his passing was marked by a quiet and personal farewell. Hayes left the world knowing that he would be with his beloved wife again, leaving behind a legacy of service and love. James Garfield, the 20th president, had the misfortune of being shot in a train station by an assassin just 100 days into his presidency. Garfield was initially able to survive the shooting, as the bullets missed vital organs. However, doctors, lacking modern sterilization practices, probed his wounds with unclean instruments, leading to fatal infections. Garfield's final words were heartbreaking and filled with a sense of helplessness. "Swaim, can't you stop the pain?" His tragic death highlighted the danger of medical malpractice during that time and has remained a painful reminder of how a lack of proper medical care can affect even the highest leaders in the country. Chester A. Arthur, the 21st president, had a relatively uneventful presidency, but his death in 1886 was marked by a quiet and sad ending. Arthur had been battling Bright's disease, a kidney condition, for several years, which eventually led to his death at the age of 57. Although there were no definitive last words recorded, some believe his final words were, "Life is not worth living." These words reflected the profound toll that his illness had taken on his body and spirit. Arthur's passing, though not dramatic, left the nation mourning for a leader who had quietly handled the duties of the presidency, yet was cut short by an incurable disease. Grover Cleveland, the 22nd and 24th president, holds the unique distinction of being the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. He died at the age of 71, 1908, succumbing to heart failure. His last words were poignant and filled with a sense of fulfillment. "I've tried so hard to do right." Cleveland's passing marked the end of a long, challenging life, but his death was one that reflected a deep sense of peace and accomplishment in his public service. While his presidency had been a mixture of both praise and criticism, Cleveland's final moments were filled with a sense of closure and satisfaction. Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd president, faced a tragic end due to an illness that took him much too soon. After a long and challenging presidency, Harrison contracted the flu, which soon developed into pneumonia. Despite receiving medical attention, his lungs failed him, and he passed away at the age of 67 1,901. His last words were filled with desperation as he struggled to breathe. "Are there any doctors here? Doctor, my lungs." His final moments were marked by a desperate plea for help, a tragic reminder of the fragility of life. Harrison's death, much like his presidency, was short-lived but impactful. He died trying to hold on, reflecting his tireless work ethic and dedication to his country. William McKinley, the 25th president, was tragically assassinated while attending a public event in Buffalo, New York in 1901. A Polish-American anarchist named Leon Czolgosz approached McKinley during a meet and greet and shot him twice, one bullet grazing him and the other lodging deep into his abdomen. Despite efforts to save him, McKinley succumbed to gangrene from the unsterilized medical procedures that followed the shooting. McKinley's final words, spoken to his wife, were, "We are all going. We are all going. God's will be done, not ours." These calm, resigned words were his final expression of faith and acceptance as he faced death after a violent attack. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president, was undoubtedly one of the most dynamic and adventurous presidents in American history. Known for his toughness, Roosevelt survived a gunshot wound during a campaign speech in 1912. Despite the bullet lodged in his chest, he continued the speech for over an hour. It was said that Roosevelt gave a speech as if nothing had happened, showcasing his unyielding strength. However, after his presidency, Roosevelt's health began to deteriorate, and in 1919, at the age of 60, he died from a blood clot in his sleep. His last words, "Put out the light, James," were simple and quiet. A man who had spent a lifetime in the spotlight, now asking for peace and darkness at the end. Roosevelt's death, though peaceful, marked the loss of one of the most robust and inspiring figures in American politics. William Howard Taft, the 27th president, was known for his larger-than-life figure and humorous personality. However, his final years were marked by heart problems that took a toll on his health. Taft passed away in 1930 at the age of 72 from heart failure. Sadly, no last words were recorded from the president, leaving his passing a quiet and somber affair. His death went unremarked by dramatic statements or final requests, reflecting the calm yet heavy toll that his health had taken on him. Although Taft's presidency was not as widely remembered as some of his predecessors, his final days reflect the quiet end of a life lived in public service. Woodrow Wilson, the 28th president, had a presidency defined by significant achievements, including leading the country through World War I. However, his later years were marked by personal and physical struggles. In 1919, Wilson suffered a massive stroke, which left him partially paralyzed. The stroke severely impacted his ability to function, and his wife, Edith Wilson, essentially took over many of his duties in the White House. When he passed away in 1924 at the age of 67, his last words were, "I am a broken piece of machinery. When the machine is broken, I am ready." These words reflected the toll his physical and mental health had taken on him. Despite the legacy he left behind, Wilson's last moments were a quiet acknowledgement of the toll that leadership had taken on him. And there you have it, some of the most dramatic and unexpected presidential deaths in history. But trust me, the story doesn't end here. In Part 2, we'll dive into even more jaw-dropping final moments that you won't want to miss. Click the link to watch the next part and discover what happens next. See you there.